at the Delft University of Technology, and one of them is of course, interested in Agile. And one of the things we're investigating now is the concept of value in Agile software teams, or in Agile teams in general, because everybody talks about it and say, it's all about Agile. The product owner is there to maximize the value of the product. The teams deliver products of highly value. But then you start to ask, what does value actually mean? And then the second thing is, what do you actually do? And the last talk that I've seen from you was, you have some experience. So we're really interested in picking your brain, what you have seen regarding making value concrete. And the second is what kind of practices you have seen you need to make to deal with value, to steer on it and stuff like this. This is roughly the goal of today. So having said that, please give us all the answers.
You two are awesome. Thank you both very much. Thank you both very much. Well, may I ask, from all the research and the students and the other folks you may interview and from yourselves, as you develop a more broad, useful definition of value and the practices to achieve it, please share it back with me. I will share you the piece that I think I've learned, and please help make a more complete picture, because you're going broad. That's the benefit of research, and deep, where you find something interesting. What I'll say is, recently at Tesla, that has very much rebooted and re-understood many things that I thought I knew. And how to say it, I very intentionally finished a book called Scrum Master, the Agile Training Seminar for Business Performance, just before starting Tesla. I wanted to make clear, here's what I think works. And then I went into Tesla. And most of that book still stands, although I've been making updates. I use LeanPub so I can make updates. And so I say, actually, once I was in Tesla, I learned this, and here's an update. But the concept of value is one of the larger updates, larger changes. Here is the value chain as I understood it, working in that company. And to be clear, Tesla is the most valuable automotive company on planet Earth. They're, depending on how you measure it, the most disruptive company of our times. And they're now the fourth valuable company, period, on planet Earth, far surpassing every automotive company. If you add up every automotive company together, they are worth less than Tesla, and Tesla is the fourth largest company by market capitalization of any company globally. They're larger than the entire GDP of Pakistan and some other small countries now. So apparently they're doing something valuable. So what does value appear to be in that, to them? Elon Musk pays everyone's salaries very directly, and the company feels extremely flat. And I've talked about that in some other interviews, so we won't go there here unless you want to. But the point is, you're directly accountable for what Musk wants. And so it's what Musk values really drives everything in a visible way. And what Musk wants is huge and very clear. What Musk wants is this thing called the master plan. He splits it into 3 or 4 steps depending on the current master plan version. Right now it's 4 steps again. And whenever those 4 steps are done, Musk writes a new master plan. And the master plan, like originally it was, make an expensive electric car. If there are any proceeds from that at all, if there's any profit at all, use it to make a slightly less expensive luxury car, which was then the Model S. And if there are any proceeds from that, use it to make a mainstream, more affordable electric car, which was the Model 3. The whole time do it while building out solar-fed electric infrastructure. By the way, keep it a secret, don't tell anyone, which is hilarious because this was publicly posted, but it says, shh, don't tell anyone at the bottom, which is kind of funny because it's posted publicly, right? So that was master plan 1. That's what value was. And all the master plans lead to, and Musk says this very clearly, it's again not a secret at all, expanding the light of consciousness out among the stars. And that's huge, that's broad. That means, well, diesel and gasoline aren't terribly useful throughout the solar system, much less interstellar. So we're going to need another power system. So Musk is actually big on nuclear energy as well, not only solar, right? Because how do you spread the light of consciousness out among the stars? So this tells you exactly what value is. So Neuralink is value. The idea of a currency that's not constrained by government boundaries suddenly has value, and suddenly Musk plugging Dogecoin starts to make more sense. It's actually core to the master plan and the larger vision. So that's value, anything that moves us towards. So what does that translate to even more directly? Well, you have these apps that you get in your first 4 hours as an employee, and they show the CAPx and OPEX of whatever team you say you're in. And that's capital expenditure and operational expenditure. And it's actually, you see the number, the raw number, but actually above that, you see a percent. And what that percent is, this is the driving value concrete number for everything that I did or anyone does. Whatever team you say you're on, you have this percent number, and it's what was the cost for your team to run for a length of time, usually a week. That's your burn rate. That includes any software licenses, any machines you rented, any tools you bought, consumable supplies you bought, computers you had repaired, computers you bought, whatever, and everyone's salary, which is dynamic because people can come and go on teams, but it is tracked by timesheets because there's California law. I was primarily in the mothership, which is Fremont, California. So California law has timesheets, and those were largely done automatically for you, but they exist. So you have a expense to employ, real time. That is then compared to your estimated value towards the mission. And that is largely computed by machine learning. So if I'm on a team that's trying to make the heat pump more efficient, and we release a 20% improvement in heat pump efficiency, there's a machine learning stack that attempts to say, how valuable is that to Tesla, mostly as market cap. And it's not that market cap is the most useful, but it's clean and easy, and you can compare it to burn rate. You can compare it to OPEX and CAPEX. And that gives that team, whoever was on the team at that time, a percent, which is your efficiency. And what you really want to know is it going up or going down? Are you getting more efficient at creating value for the company per how much you spend, or less, or staying the same?
And Joe, sorry, this efficiency, is it calculated from the CAPEx OPEX ratio?
Yep. Oh, well, CAPEX OPEX value ratio. So, because CAPEX is the expense of capital expense, right, tools, and then operation, that's everyone's salaries. So both of those are burn rate.
Okay, so the percentage that they give you is not a CAPEX OPEX ratio. The percentage is the efficiency of the value divided by the cost.
Yes, and this is part of where Tesla's culture comes from. You are encouraged to burn money as fast as you can if it makes value come faster. And this is very unusual for most companies. So you are encouraged to dump money as fast as you can valuably deploy it, because that only makes your ratio go up.
It's almost a game.
It's exactly a game. It's actually extremely fun.
But in fact, what you're doing, I think this is really bringing the information down. Like not the CEO being aware of what the stock prices is or what CAPEX or OPEX is, just saying, I want to, how do you call this, empower my people. But if I want to empower my people, I also have to make sure that they understand what they do for the company.
Well, in addition to your work with ProAwareness, I think that allows folks like you who work with Agile companies like ProAwareness to see what digitalization and self-management actually is. And I think this is widely misunderstood, many teams are told you're agile now, self-manage, but they don't have a fast feedback loop of so they can't self-manage. There's no information on which to self-manage.
And then agile becomes the purpose of itself. Well, it never
which actually is fun, but it makes the company not necessarily more competitive because we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have the feedback. And this is what Tesla, and actually this is what Silicon Valley in general gets really right, is rapid real-time analytics, now more and more machine learning driven. Tesla is the best I've ever experienced, but many companies have a flavor of this. And that allows people to actually self-manage, as opposed to Agile for a purpose in itself. Instead, it's Agile for maximizing value to the company. And if the mission of the company is valuable to society, then that's net ethically good even, which is pretty cool and motivating even more.
Wow. So in fact, you're making every employee CEO, and especially if they and if you also can encourage them to have stock,
which they do. Yeah, many of the people I worked with at Tesla were already millionaires, and they continued to work there because they liked the work and they believed in the mission. Many, like that was not unusual. It was actually common. And because the stock appreciates so rapidly and you're so directly impacting the stock, they became millionaires on Tesla stock.
Wow. So this is one of the things you've really seen there. It's, I mean, you know, we were looking for actions, measures, things you can do, practices to employ value steering. I think this is an amazing one. It's the first time we encountered it in this series of interviews. What should we do? Should we elaborate more on this, where you can give us a little bit more detail if you have them? Or do you think, well, but I also have another example of a practice which makes sense?
The important takeaway, I would imagine, from what I think I've learned, you just summarized elegantly, that there is epidemically across industry as of now. It's only 2021 December right now, so hopefully it's better by next year. 2022 December is, if you're listening to this then, it's hopefully much better. Right now, epidemically, there is a misunderstanding of what digitalization actually is for a company. Digitalization is enabling self-management, which allows you to go faster. And Volkswagen, for example, has massive digitalization initiatives. If you want to spend 10 million euro, you create a business plan of how that will make at least 30 million euro, and you wait in a queue to try to escalate that all the way up to the board. And if it's 10 million euro or more, actually the board above the board has to vote on it. The Pierce family, the owning family, the Porsche family as it's often pronounced elsewhere, because they have 40% control of the VW board above the board. And they have to like it and understand it. So now you've shifted all significant expenditures to whether one family likes and understands it, and they only meet on a slow cadence. And you've bottlenecked the entire growth of the company. So digitalization did not unlock speed. So this is an epidemic misunderstanding of what digitalization is and what self-management for speed is. And it's completely unknown to most companies, and those companies are lowering in market share. Investors are understanding this, interestingly. And I'm not saying investors are always right and we should magically respect investors more than other people, but what I am saying is here is a group of people that do seem to understand what digitalization actually means.
Yeah, but I think, but if you look to how companies digitalize is, of course, in most cases they digitalize the ongoing process. So because stuff went slow, we built this hierarchy of splitting up value into smaller pieces. And the first step to digitalize is digitalize that process. I suppose, but maybe you can help us, that Tesla was built up from the ground. So they never had this hierarchy or cascading down of value splitting up in parts. They started from the ground off, where you say, well, we step it over and we immediately implement value steering to the people that actually execute to do the work.
Well, let's not let Tesla off the hook that easily. Tesla did start from the ground up, and let's remember Elon is a programmer, but the Model S had a huge amount of design input from Mercedes and Daimler and Bosch, which were incredibly waterfall at the time. Then I got to meet some of the now Agile teams in Bosch. And what they told me is Tesla made them Agile, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. So you have consistent pushback from Musk. What I want to say is most companies would have said, well, we have these suppliers, they have a 2-year lead time, let's just create a waterfall around that. Yeah. And also, Tesla continues to buy companies, traditional tool makers out of Germany, extremely waterfall. And Musk transforms them to, I'll say, Agile. Musk doesn't say Agile, by the way, to be clear. Musk doesn't almost ever use the word. But I'll say to short sprints that each demonstrate value with self-managing through digitalization. So it's not just that Tesla is an Agile native company. It's that the person who's currently making the finance decisions sweats the details, gets involved in the small steps, and fights the waterfall actively at every level of the company.
Okay, so two things. One, every CEO who wants to implement this should have been a programmer.
That's probably true.
Because else you don't understand digitalization really from the guts. Second is, how would you see this being applied in a, how would I call this, a more historic government-like organization? So how would you think about if you would bring the stuff you've seen and you've just explained to an environment where the CEO is not a programmer, they have traditional controls, they're not being judged on speed. What comes to mind if I sketch something like this?
Yeah. So there's a model that I'm so proud of. I actually named it after myself. I used to call it reverse Conway's law. And then I realized people were citing it, but not knowing where to get more information. So I did rename it in 2006 to Justice's Law. And it's about this. How do you apply any of these to a traditional established company? For example, like you said, government involved or government run, maybe. You know, you have all the trappings of, well, slowness, right? So what do you do? Justice's law, or the reverse Conway's law, is you look at the product, what are we actually making, and what are the parallel executable work streams. So for example, for a Tesla Model 3, you have the battery pack as a completely separate work stream. It can evolve completely independently as long as the interface is still similar, it can plug in, right? So that's a separate work stream. The rest of the car isn't waiting on the next version of the battery pack. It will also work, it will plug in, right? So whatever the parallel executable work streams are, not sequential work streams, that's different. So if you had like a cost out department that takes previous designs and tries to knock out cost, that's not what I'm talking about, that's sequential. But parallel execution, whatever the number of those are, what is the percent company structure that maps there? Let me try to say it more clearly. The modules of the product define the structure of the company. So if we have a battery pack and then a frame or a chassis of the car, any company structure that is battery pack, so battery pack cost out, battery pack procurement, battery pack software development, fits Justice's law. But anytime we have a service or a skills group outside there, like procurement, that means battery pack and frame are in line for procurement. There's a queue now. By definition, there's a queue. And that counts against your score in Justice's law. What that allows us to do is, whether it's government owned or not, whether it's Silicon Valley programmer entrepreneur owned or not, it lets us see, is the company sequentially dependent or can it parallel execute? And this, by the way, is exactly what software developers have been doing since the idea of concurrent processing You're essentially making multiple threads that can execute simultaneously.
It's very interesting because I've heard of, and I know and I've read, and I also recommend the reverse Conway maneuver. From today on, I will call it Justice's Law, because it's not the same, Joe, because you added two things. The thing is that you first reverse engineer the architecture. So you look at the product, and then you just don't say what's the architecture. You reverse engineer the architecture of the product towards parallel processing. And the second thing is that you then look at the value stream in the organization that actually do the same parallel execution. And then you say that ratio has to go up. And if you have 100% and stuff like this. So it's more than just reverse Conway, because reverse Conway says take your intended architecture, your target architecture, and form your organization in the same structure. But you're adding two layers on top of that. Thanks, Ben.
Joe, may I ask you a question? Do you advise all companies to do a parallelization of their processes to add value?
No. There's an edge case. At most companies, but there's an edge case. If the company can design, analyze, build, test, deploy their product, whatever it is, if they can do that in less than a month, no. It would just add complexity. They're already getting a fast feedback loop within humans' normal length of memory. The ideal factory is a laserjet printer, and the ideal product is a document you type. Your factory makes whatever you want in like a few seconds, a few minutes. It has to warm up, and there's a lot of pages. Then no, you don't need to parallel process that. You don't need to add any modules there. It's already really fast. It's already less than a month.
Joe, just a question, because you explained the presence of tools. You presented that to say that the employees at Tesla, they have an app where they actually see this transparency.
Yeah.
Which means that, let's say, value measurement and cost measurement is being supported.
Yes.
Where are these teams that make this stuff?
Do you want the real answer or like the easy to understand answer?
Yes. How does this go? And then maybe you can tell us how it went, and maybe what you recommend. Maybe split it in two.
I think a really good example of this is actually what ProAwareness does with companies by recommending and helping set up DevOps. So for software companies, and actually not just software companies, but it's more understood in software companies, they'll spin up teams whose job it is to make tools that other teams like and benefit from. And it's not their job to run those tools. The other teams do. So we want teams to do their own testing so they get a fast feedback loop, but you'll have a team making automated tests, and those are available. And if people aren't using the automated tests, then we know that that team either needs to better evangelize or make better tests, right? Yeah, that. Well, the same idea here for automated value tools or any of the self-managing tools is we can have, and Tesla does have, teams that produce those tools, and it's not their job to execute the tools. It's their job to make sure they're understood and available and walk up simple. No training, no documentation. It should be as easy to use as playing a game on your phone. And in fact, that's what they are. They're little apps on your phone that are written by people primarily with experience making fun games on your phone, right? With all the gamification experience. Okay, that's one step, and that's more easy to understand, I think. Now, the weirder one is it's not like these are persistent teams. Tesla is way too agile for that. and that gets back to the whole self-allocation of work and law of 2 feet. And it's run just like an open space conference for those that have gone there. So you go to the team that's currently improving or making one of these apps if you think you can have value anytime you want. And you walk out anytime you want. So it's not like there's a PMO, a project management organization, that oversees these tools. Tesla's way too agile for that. That said, that would be a useful step for a lot of companies. that have a PMO already and aren't yet so fast that the PMO is the bottleneck.
Okay. And are these tools open source then, or because if you can do walk-up simple, then any engineer at any point of time is able to pick the code, change some stuff because he or she has seen it's valuable with some others. So how do you get access to the code? How do you make sure it's being released? How does this go? Because it does require a lot of access and open source management in a way.
Part of this I'd like to ask Elon about if I ever had the chance. But part of this I can answer clearly. First is, how do you get access? When I became a Tesla employee and it looked like everybody, even people who were hired to clean the floor, once you're an employee, you are empowered. And that means you have access. You can go anywhere, you can see anything, you can do anything, period. As far as I could tell, there's 2 access levels, employee and not. And in fact, even people from outside, like that walk by pre-COVID, are allowed to see a lot more than you might expect. Like even people outside the company. It's radical transparency. And again, speed is the governing metric. So you don't want to wait for approvals. So the code bases, as far as I could see, were just there on shares, and people would try to make those walk up simple. And it was up to the people working on it to try to make it walk up simple. It's not like there was a beautiful librarian group that would enforce taxonomy. And it actually might be good if there were, but that's not how it was running in my experience. It was up to anyone. Use the law of 2 feet if you think you can make this easier to understand, and you have access. Is one. Then the part that I wish I could ask Elon is, Elon previously pushed a lot of things into open source and publicly, and many patents, some really advanced battery operations were pushed into open source. And Elon did it with a meme. It was hilarious. Elon said, all our patents are belong to you, which is a play on all your base are belong to us, which was a meme at the time. Actually, it was already an old meme, but it's a good one. And just dumped it into the public domain. And the justification Elon put was, we're not trying to make more electric cars than anyone. We're trying to advance the advent of sustainable transport. And I thought that was so righteous, so just. Well, Elon recently seems to, there's still a lot put into open source continuously by Tesla, but there's a lot that's not. And what Elon has said more recently is open source is awesome, but we're not seeing faster development in open source than we are inside the company anyway, so we're not actually getting any benefit. And the other companies either aren't using it or they're abusing it. So it doesn't appear to be increasing the number of electric vehicles sold by other companies. Like companies instead are giving it to their legal departments to try to be patent trolls against Tesla. And then lastly, and probably most important, is Musk saying, if everyone in Tesla and SpaceX and Neuralink and Boring Company and OpenAI would work for free, it wouldn't matter. We'd still just push it all out into the public domain, into open source. But currently, not all of them will. And leasing these tech or putting a barrier around it allows us to pay these people. It creates a profit stream around this knowledge work. And I think that's ultimately what it comes to. Now, as a side, that hit me on the chest really hard because I had run, in a good way, because I had run an open source automotive company for years and set 4 world records. That's Wikispeed. Really, really proud of it. And the best it did financially was break even. And I realized that you need to be a master of open source to run a sustainable, financially growth open source initiative. I do think it's possible, but I think it's easier if you take at least some choice technologies and monetize them. which is what Tesla is doing.
Oh, well, if you come to the conclusion, as you said before, that speed is the only thing that counts, speed of innovation is the only thing that matters, or the only thing that counts. If you say, well, I give stuff away and it doesn't help me to increase speed, then I just as much capitalize on what I make to use that money to speed up. So it's not the first choice, but maybe a second alternative.
I agree, but I'll say I do think it is even more charitable than that. If it sped up Volkswagen's electric cars, I think Tesla would still do it, or Ford's, or Stellantis. But it looks like towards the mission, like Musk is, as far as I can tell, the real deal, actually aiming towards this mission over comfort or profit or luxury. So I actually do believe Musk, even if it were shrinking Tesla, but advancing the mission, Musk would still do it.
Okay. So back to value and back to value steering, Joe. We've talked about a few things. The two things that I recall is the first thing about the CAPx, OPEX to the execution level, and the second thing is what you've explained about the Joe Justice law. To speed things up.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Any other practice that you've seen to increase at least, let's say, the making value concrete, or the validating of the value, or the measuring of the value? Anything you've seen that actually works that we haven't talked about yet?
Sure. There's some stepping stone practices. Like being full on Tesla might be the fastest I've ever seen, but that's a big jump. Some people can make that in one jump, I think. Some companies can, but other companies might want a stepping stone approach. One that I like very much, and it's maybe too slow for Tesla, but maybe it's a really good step in the right direction for a lot of companies, is one I learned from Alex Brown. Alex Brown, before being a Scrum trainer, worked at Boston Consulting Group, and so I imagine it's a standard Boston Consulting Group practice that was likely from a standard MBA program. But it's the Venn diagram, the three circles where they overlap, of what you can do, what you can be passionate about, and what you can get paid to do. Now, there's an even more advanced version of that called Ikigai.
Ikigai, yes.
The Japanese word.
Sounds like Ikigai, yeah, exactly. That's what makes the world a better place, right?
Yeah, so Ikigai is even cooler. The one I said is even simpler, so it's a stepping stone, and then Ikigai might be the next level. And I find that for people who are attempting to assess value, especially quickly, to be helpful. If they have many choices, then I will often use what's called the Eisenhower matrix. It's been attributed to many people. One of the names for it is the Eisenhower matrix, which is 4 quadrants. Is it urgent and important? Put it in the sprint backlog. Execute immediately. Is it important but not urgent? Put it in the product backlog. Execute it in priority order without disrupting the current sprint. Is it not important and not urgent? Ask, can we delete it? Sometimes you still can't, right? But ask, attempt to decline. Is it not important but urgent? And outsource it on another team.
Yeah.
And then the last one, the Kano model, which is what Apple uses, which is really, people hate it. People hate the Kano model, and yet people often love Apple products. Kano. It's a Japanese innovator, a Japanese researcher, Kano-san, and it is what Apple uses, and many people hate it. And here's why. But it works really well for Apple. I should say it's what Jobs used, and much less so under Cook. Okay. So part of what's changed about Apple products, whether people like that or they don't, is no longer applying the Kano model. And the Kano model is super simple. You group your work into 3 categories. You can actually do that with a 4-quadrant graph, which actually it adds some benefit, but really you're trying to get 3 categories. And it's, what must this product have? It cannot deliver value if you don't have X. So for the version 1 iPod, it's got to play music. If it doesn't play music, it has failed as a product. Then the next category is, what do the customers want? Well, they want playlists. They want recommended music. They want to add metadata or say they like songs. They want to share songs. They want repeat by album, repeat by artist, repeat by mix, everything they want. Then what's exciting to the customers? And this is often stuff the customers haven't expressed a want to yet. It's often a research group has determined we could, and then an intuitive leader like Steve Jobs says, yes, that's exciting. The Kano model says, and actually I'll add to it, so this is Joe's Kano model. The Kano model says you've got to do at least enough must-dos to complete a user story. Now, that's me saying a user story. Kano doesn't use Agile vocabulary. But to practically use it, you've got to complete a user value path, a full user story. Then each release has to include at least one exciter, or you don't get adoption. You're another product out there, you can only compete on cost or brand. So if you want to earn market, create brand, or defend brand, or compete as premium or not just on cost, you have to have at least one exciter. Then the Kano model, and this is no addition from me, this is straight up the Kano model, says do not do anything the customer wants. And it works. And you get an iPod with no screen, that you can't make playlists, you can't edit the metadata, you can't even repeat separately artist or genre, but it plays music and it has an exciting feature. It plays all day on one battery set. It's smaller than any others, and it can hold at that time what some people thought was your entire music collection.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Joe, with the, I like it, not a thing that the customer wants, but I think what's meant with it, but please correct me if I'm wrong, is don't do anything that the customers say that they want.
Yes, because by definition, it's already known. And that's that's just like
resonate from what they know. And that's in many cases, you know, when people say to me, yeah, but my customers come to me with solutions and they don't tell me the problem. I said, well, that's fine. Just listen to the solution, but then see what the problem is behind it. Don't expect them to explain you their problem because they may not be aware of it. And also don't expect them to explain to you an alternative solution that they doesn't know it exists. So that's what I like about the Kano model. So it's less rigorously than you just said it, but it means it's probably the same.
Yes.
As soon as you start to implement to do what the customers say they want, you're off the beat. You're off the track.
You can only really compete on cost or feature count then, or brand, cost on your brand.
Wow. Erik.
Awesome.
Questions from
you gentlemen as well. Thank you so much.
I do have.
Oh, Erik. Oh,
maybe Erik has some questions on his list.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
Yeah. Joe, what would you advise Agile software development teams when they first have to deal with value?
Awesome. I do believe it's important to know, are we being entrepreneurial or are we delivering on a contract? And in a meta way, it's the same, but practically it's quite different. If we're delivering on a contract, which is fine, I think can be absolutely agile, the terms of the contract are our backlog. And we'll try to order those by risk reduction. This one's really tricky, and if this doesn't work, nothing else matters. Okay, we'll try that first, right? but then it's the contract, and so the value's been negotiated largely, and we can attempt to engage and attempt to change the contract to addendums as practical, but primarily we're burning through. If we're entrepreneurial, it's a new product, and we're then gonna try to go to market with it. Very different. Then, honestly, it's a lot of meditation. It's a lot of sitting in mindfulness, journaling, yoga, I mean, for real, it's those things.
Yeah.
It's a lot of Steve Jobs, esoteric turtleneck wearing, eating only fruit for a month at a time. I mean, really, that is where innovation comes from, the 40 days in the desert type of thing.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on this, because it was the first thing was what I expected when you said contract, but now entrepreneurial, you're going in different routes. Please explain, because you could also say, well, then you have to measure what success is, to start to experiment. That's also could be an answer, but you say no, you have to go deep in.
There's all these traps with spreadsheet value. As soon as you open up Microsoft Excel, you're dead. And I love Microsoft Excel, but it will kill you if you're trying to be an entrepreneur immediately. And it has great use for other reasons. I use Microsoft Excel all the time, or spreadsheets, Open Office, whatever. But really, if we're trying to innovate a product, it is a sensation in your tummy. And one way to guide and nurture that sensation is if you find something that you hunger for as a human on this planet so much that you have trouble sleeping at night when you think about it because it's so important to you, whatever that is. I mean, as trivial or as non-trivial as that may be, but it drives you. You can feel a gut response to that issue. Now you have a good thermometer. Now you could be a product owner for that topic. Now you could try to create a product backlog to, in the fewest possible steps, increase that feeling in your stomach. And as soon as you try to do work breakdown structure, as soon as you try to even do a modular split, which I highly recommend, but that's not for this stage, not for value identification, you lose it, because it is truly a feeling in your gut. And if you start to lose that, I mean, that's where you really start modifying your diet or restricting inputs, stop watching the news for a period of time or whatever's working for you, so that you can feel that feeling more. And you allow that to be amplified and amplified and amplified. And when you're a really good, I'll say, product owner, you can keep that feeling even now when you've opened up Excel and you're checking module count. But that's way harder, right? To be in the weeds and feeling the direction of the wind at the same time.
So it's great, because I had a question. Can you define value? But I think you just did. It really is a feeling in your gut. Is that your definition of value, Joe?
What's weird about it is that means not everyone can be an effective innovation leader or value barometer, or I'll say product owner, for every product. And I love Henrik Nieberg saying this very clearly when Henrik Nieberg recorded the now, I think, infamous Product Owner in a Nutshell video, saying, here's Pat. Pat's a product owner. Pat doesn't know how we're going to build it, but Pat knows who wants it, what value it should achieve, and Pat thinks about it every day.
Yeah, she talks about it every day.
Yeah, and talks about it every day. Yeah, we've seen the video enough. Yeah. And there's something you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
And so that means if you're going to make a gambling website, you need a morally questionable gambling addict as your product owner. And if you're going to be spreading the light of consciousness out among the stars, you don't want a venture capitalist. So there's an alignment there. Not everyone is passionate and can feel that about every topic. Now, I'll get really weird here for just a minute because I have a chance, and I think you'll let me. There are stratagems to find the rest of the value that are really not ever talked about. I mentioned them once in an interview, and the person almost stopped me. They're like, okay, speed up. There's this.
Find the rest of the value.
Yeah. Yes. So an old idea of plus and minus, yin and yang, light and dark, is you can look at the value you know and say, what's the opposite of it? And that shows you a lot of dark matter, a lot of good things, a lot of more value that you want. or risks you want to avoid. It absolutely enlightens the situation. So here's the value I know. What's the opposite of that? Here's the persona I understand. What's the opposite of this persona? That's the first level. That's pretty trivial. It's still super fun. If this is positive, what's negative? If this is negative, what's positive? If that's heavy, what's light? And you can already split that by anything that has a rough 2-level divide. Weight, cost. Well, what's the most expensive way we could do it? We've only been talking about cheap, and that will uncover value, whether you choose to pursue it now or ever. That's the trivial way. Well, here's where it gets weirder. There are then many cultural ways to split far more repeatably than 2 ways. And these all have baggage because they've all been around so long, but skip the baggage and instead use it to find different ways to split the problem. So one is 5 elemental theory. If the value I'm seeing now is like growth, I could think of that, and there's more than one 5 element set. The Japanese and Chinese use different sets, but one of them, if growth, I could call that wood or green, right? Okay, well then what's fire? What's destruction that makes ash that then feeds growth? You can take any of these mostly ancient paradigms, and now you can split it 5 ways. Then there is the Bagua, the 8 triagram split, and very few people use this. It super works. You're like, if this is dividing, then what's joining? What's crossing? And you can, there is no shortage of value identification now. And this isn't new. This is about as old as written history, right? And so there's all this baggage on top of it. So I'm not trying to bring in any of that baggage. What I am trying to say is it uncovers the rest of the value by finding repeatable splits. Now, yeah, if you listen to a song you really like while you sing in the car, you might, that alone might trigger seeing more of the value because you've gotten yourself in an excited state or a different state. But that's not necessarily repeatable. These splits allow you to repeatably, and then with a group, if your group has practiced splitting by light and dark, positive, negative, for a few hours over the course of the last few sprints or weeks, they help you do it. You can now do that as a group in refinement. And if your group really is benefiting from value splitting, maybe they'll even learn the 8 triagram, an 8 triagram split, which by the way, recursively splits into 64 and 108. I mean, you can go nuts. And so of course, then the next question is, well, when do you stop? And it's when you know what to do next. You don't have to keep splitting. If for as many teams as you're lucky enough to have, they all know what to do next. Then you don't need to keep splitting. Not yet, because you're going to learn new information by them finishing what they're on now, and you'll throw away any additional backlog you created anyway. But if you have 108 teams, if you're that lucky, you're capitalized at that level. I mean, Tesla's got over 100,000 people, Musk companies collected now. Then you do need to split a lot of ways. So everyone's fed. Everyone has top priority, high value work.
Wow, Joe. Wow. Because what we see in most cases, we're doing a lot of these interviews and we see several ways, but one of them is indeed, it's like an analytic way of splitting up value. And what are the dimensions? And then we take a step further and they build a value map with dimensions and stuff like this. And you can go on and on with that forever. And I don't say it's wrong. It's maybe a good communication way and stuff like this. The only thing is when to stop. And I think if you say, if you know what to do next, it's the good way. Or maybe you, in an organizational environment, you maybe should, when you have enough, for you to have the how you call it, the order, how do you call this, toestemming, permission to do the next step. Maybe knowing it in a larger organization may not be enough. So you may know it, but you also have, let's say, your environmental acceptance of the other people that this is the next step, and then it's good enough.
May I ask you another question, maybe from another angle, Joe, related to value? We all grow up in our families and we all go to school. Do you think that the way we are having our school system is contributing to the way we think about value currently?
Man, I'd like to learn a lot more about that. That's a topic I'm passionate about as well. All I can say is I sure think so, and that's core to what I think is important for humanity and actually for all life, not just humans, plants and bugs and all of it. So I would love to see that matured and advanced. I do know there is now a Musk model for schools. In addition, the Netherlands has at least one EduScrum school, sometimes more than one, Ashram College. And I find that incredibly exciting because I do think students are largely being trapped. I've had a chance to run Agile with preschoolers, and they have no trouble rotating who the product owner is, any of the roles. There's no issue. They're cross-functional by definition, even with actually some fairly advanced skills. You know, if we take time to develop skills, they don't silo them. They share them and rotate. Something seems to happen in most schools in first grade. Suddenly there's this us versus them. My team should win over that team. I'm afraid to be wrong. I shouldn't be honest. Like, all kinds of weird junk happens in a lot of cultures. Asia, Africa, Europe, Americas, North and South. And it seems to start at first grade.
Yeah,
I know. I think I know why, Joe. Because in Dutch we call it afkijken. I'm not sure what's the. They tell you not to cheat. So if you're a team, you get an assignment, and the kids start to look to what the other ones are doing. The teacher will correct this behavior because you say no, you're not allowed to cheat. Looking what others are doing and learning from them is then introduced as cheating. And when you're making an exam, you don't know the answer. It's like at my university, you don't know the answer. You can write nothing, but you could also look at what the other one is doing, get inspired from that, and then give the answer. But if you do it, we consider it fraud. While in fact, it's in exam learning. I think there it goes.
By the way, Joe, I went to the Ashram college to see how they actually do that in the classroom, do Scrum. Really exciting to see that.
Yeah.
But what I also observe,
Willy Wijners is a friend of mine. Actually, I'm the third author of the EduScrum guide, Joe. You may not be aware of this, but
I wasn't aware of that.
My main contribution is Willy write a EduScrum guide. That was my contribution.
What an honor to be collaborating with you, gentle people. I hope we can only amplify each other's effect. Awesome, awesome, and awesome.
Yeah, but I've watched your videos and your YouTube channel. What I really found very interesting is what you do at Tesla. I think people have, you also mentioned that in your video, inner value. That you bring inner value to the company value instead of bringing the company value to the people. What I've seen in my interviews that you have teams and you bring company value to the teams and you have to explain to the team why they should contribute to the company value. Instead by Tesla, what I see is that inner value is brought to what the company value. So yeah, do you think that's really more successful on within organization to do that opposite? Say, okay, this is the company value that we want to achieve, hang it on the wall, and say to teams, oh, please join what your contribution is instead of bringing the company value to the teams.
I completely agree with you, Erik. I think you summarized something that I'd been experiencing and trying to figure out how to say. And I think you just clarified for me what I'd been in. Yes, Erik, that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Joe, may I ask a question related to measuring value? Because I do interviews now with product owners. I have now 12 interviews held with product owners. But the most difficult part they also found is measuring value. What's your opinion about that people should measure value? And in figures, I mean, and not telling, oh yeah, yes or no, but really put it in figures.
Yeah, I will teach as a stepping stone. Take a guess at, does this reduce risk, small, medium, large-ish, or no? Does this improve our capability? If we are successful, can we do something we couldn't do before? If yes, small, medium, large. And will it make the company money, either in the future or now? Small, medium, large. And average those. If you're in a growth mode and have a large treasure trove of cash, you can overbalance to capability building. Or if you're right on the edge of finances, your burn rate is almost break even, then you balance it more towards revenue creation. Those three categories. That said, I think that's a stepping stone. Very experienced people are absolutely using that feeling in their gut directly. I have not heard Musk describe it in those words, but it is my impression that's exactly what Musk is doing. And Jobs has said words along those lines before Steve Jobs passed away. I think at that level, you simply are amplifying that feeling. And people at that level, in that mode, will not uncommon redact something. They'll say, we should X. No, wait, sorry, we should Y. Because they can feel it when they say the less right thing. Now, the problem there is, if you're in that role, you've got to be paying for the development, because you can't justify that. So this is why you have Musk, who pays everybody. Musk is the funder. And this is why Jobs got fired and left and needed to be invited back, given authority and protection. So Jobs didn't have to justify anymore. And this is why Herbert Diess is on the rocks right now, is losing power right now at Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Joe, I think we're looking at the time also here at your alarm clock going. I suppose it's not because the eggs have cooked. Probably it's because your next appointment is coming our way. Erik, do you have a final question, or shall we round off?
Well, I have one question still pending, but let's see how far we come. I found also, when I have interviews with product owners, they found it very difficult to have prioritization of the different valuable topics they have, because they have reduced capacity. How does that work within Tesla, or how did you do that with Wiki Speed to do prioritization of the different valuable items?
Object-oriented architecture helps a lot, because now you can execute in parallel in small pieces. So if you have eight parallel modules, fully parallel, you can be saying yes to 8 things at once. So that helps a lot. And I think that's often misunderstood or not understood, the actual value of object-oriented architecture, independently executable, multi-threading, essentially, right? That's one. That really was an evade of the question, but I think it's actually very true and not often understood. Then you're still going to hit a sequential prioritization. I had wonderful success for many years prioritizing only by awesomeness. If we could do one thing by sprint review, we happened to be on a cadence, we had to have sprint reviews, they were every Thursday, they were 1 week. What is the most awesome thing we basically 80% confidence we could show working, done, tested, on sale by Thursday? So notice I baked definition of done in there. That helped make sure the company could stay funded, because something stayed on sale, right?
Yeah.
And prioritizing by awesomeness solved for employee engagement. It solved for customer interest, marketing, investor interest, so we could continue to be funded even before there were saleable products. It conquered a lot of other issues. So I will say, prioritize by awesomeness.
So we're back to the Kano model in a way then, Joe. They say don't prioritize on what customers want, but on the exciters. And if you shine a light on that, probably it's much easier to prioritize than, of course, beside the parallel thing. Joe, it's 1 minute. I think, we've promised you to end in time. Can I express the utmost largest gratitude for opening up your mind and sponging stuff out?
Yeah, Thank you very much, Joe.
It is my honor.